views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, the Russia-Ukraine war continues to go on, displacing thousands of civilians. But some media coverage is now being criticized as racist, with reports that non-white refugees often face discrimination at the border as they try to exit Ukraine. We'll discuss that and a whole lot more in this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Well, hello everyone and welcome to Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. You can watch us every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. And also we invite you to stay connected to us on our social media platforms. That's BronxNet TV. If you're trying to reach me personally, of course you can catch me on Facebook, professional page Daren C. Jaime, Twitter and Instagram, DC Jaime23. And there you can find some information as well as possibly even some inspiration. Well, we go front and center with today's show. The New York Times reporting that Africans trying to leave the Ukraine were forced at the end of long lines as they attempted to flee the country. There are even some reports that they were actually beaten by authorities. Now, in a statement, the African Union describes the reports as, quote, shockingly racist, and wrote, all people have the right to cross international borders during conflict, and as such, they should endure the same rights to cross to safety from the conflict in Ukraine, notwithstanding their nationality or their racial identity. Well, joining me now and sharing a little bit more in this conversation, we're pleased to have Michael Blake, the founder and CEO of Atlas Strategy Group Incorporated, focuses on economic empowerment through increasing access to capital, contracting, and opportunities to minorities, women, and small businesses, along with creating metrics-based programs for social justice and civic engagement for communities of color. Now, also, we know that Michael served as a three-term assembly member in the New York State Assembly, representing the 79th District in the Bronx from 2014 to 2020. He joins us now on Perspectives. And Mike, good to have you. And as we start off, just give me your perspective, because as we know, we're hearing a lot of things about Africans, people of color, really facing some real stiff challenges out there in the Ukraine, and even more recently, some legislation going forward.
Well, Daren, always great to be with you, and I appreciate the perspectives that you allow everyone to have and share in our different communities. Look, I want to just make sure we're internalizing this moment that we're in. We are in a space where, in the midst of a crisis, brothers and sisters are being denied the ability to live, to thrive, to succeed purely because of their skin color. And it seems that it doesn't matter whether it be the South in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, or what's happening from Ukraine to other countries in 2022. Being Black too often in this world means that you should be rejected. However, we're going to reject this racism. We're going to reject this discrimination. We're going to reject this nonsense, because everyone deserves a chance. I do remind people, and Daren, obviously you also could appreciate this being a man of faith yourself, that Jesus was a man of color who was also a refugee in a foreign land. And so for everyone that is professing faith in these moments, it's important for us to remind that everyone is welcome and deserves that opportunity. Grateful for we're now seeing from Ben Crump and others who have filed an official appeal and a motion to the UN to say action has to be taken about what's going on to this racist rejection that is happening amongst our Black Ukrainians. And lastly, at the end of the day, this is just about humanity. I would ask you to ask yourself, how would you feel knowing that there are men, women, and children who are having their land bombed by a despot, a dictator, and an absolute lunatic in Putin, and you're not being given access because of your skin color? There were stories about how there were families, white families, with animals that were being permitted on the trains while Black people were being stood there and told to deny. We are more than an animal, obviously, and it's time for this world to stop treating our people like animals.
And there's a huge economic impact, too, that the Ukrainians were dealing with when it came to the area of sports. We knew that some African-American athletes who actually were playing out there were told by Ukrainian officials that, and their heads of clubs, that don't worry, it's not going to be that bad. Stay here, play it out. Don't worry, your contract, if you want to keep your contract, you have to stay. And some of them had to stay in the height of missiles and all of that, to the area where people are saying, listen, why didn't you get these guys out sooner? And it was all about an economic dollar. And we had plenty of stories of athletes who really had to be forced to hunker down and stay and couldn't get out until late simply because of an economic decision made by Ukrainian clubs to say, we'd rather keep our athletes here and try to make the almighty, well, it's the dollar in the U.S., but of course, over there, the economic impact.
Well, look, we've known for centuries that we are seen as entertainment too often all across the world. And so we're in a space right now where it's applying itself once again. There was a story recently, I think Mo Cheek, the brother that was playing out there that now finally returned home to Maryland, and just internalize that you're in a country that's not your home, playing there because you want to pursue your dreams. But your life is a nightmare because all you're hearing are missiles. Or you're hearing our tanks. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that anyone that wants to get home can come home. And obviously, as we're watching in real time, simultaneously, the usage and the discriminatory actions of detaining Brittany Griner, the WNBA star in Russia, in which the accusations, which, again, we don't know because of the lack of transparency coming out of Russia, is that she had some form of an oil in her bag. We don't know that to be the case. And one of my fears right now is, are we going to see history repeat itself where once again that Black people are used as pawns in a game for other entities to try to gain access and opportunity for themselves? And so whether it be on the field or on the court, or whether it be in the court of life, we have to make sure that we're creating the spaces and this protection. That's the reason why we commend Secretary Blinken, his incredible leadership. We obviously commend President Zelensky, who people may not realize this. This man was a comedian just a few years ago and has stood up to a dictator, which we need to call Putin what he is. He's a dictator, and saying, I'm going to stand here for our people. And now all of us need to rally around what is happening in Ukraine so that our fellow Americans can get back home, so that we can address what's happening with racism, and so that we can make it very practical. We're seeing gas prices exceed $4 in many places across the country right now. And even though we only get about 3% of our oil from Russia, it's still the volatility that's happening in the region is impacting what happens here. And so when people are wondering and asking, why does what's going on in Ukraine matter to me? It should matter to you because of your prices in your pocket. It should matter to you because of the volatility in the market. It should matter to you because we all know what happens when war occurs. Usually it's Black and brown folks that are pulled in. And lastly, Daren, we have to internalize that within NATO in Article 5, it is seen that if any of the NATO countries are attacked, you treat it as if you have been attacked. And so we cannot just ignore what's happening with Ukraine. Does Putin and Russia decide to go after other areas in that manner? Because if that occurs, then we're going into a larger degree of a scale of an impact that we're not internalizing. Secretary Blinken said it about 2 weeks ago. This is the greatest threat to Europe since World War II, and we cannot diminish the magnitude of what's happening right now.
And not diminishing the magnitude at all, but concentrating on how it actually affects home. I think I had a conversation with some young people just the other day, and they were trying to make sense of how this actually plays out and affects what we're dealing with right now. And I told them, I said, listen, you're driving. You got to deal with gas prices. You have to deal with the possibility of troops that could be deployed to regions. No, they may not go to Ukraine. They may not go to Russia, but they're being deployed across. They're going to Poland. They're going across the world, and they're reeing up on our troop count just to make sure that we have the right troops in place. We heard President Biden in the State of the Union address talk about the fact that he was mobilizing troops to be able to be ready for whatever might be necessary. And so those troops come from right here in local doors. And I think sometimes we miss the local impact of something that's happening on an international level.
Absolutely. And to that point, Daren, I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Assembly. I'm the youngest brother of a man who was a sergeant first class in the Army, served for 29 years in distinction. And he served once in Germany. And so when we think about the deployment and the realignment that's now happening, it's that we have to internalize that. I have the honor of being a term member for Council on Foreign Relations. And in one of our conversations recently with the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, it was conveyed, what are the ways that help is needed? Well, you have to make sure that they're able to fight on the ground. Getting them more weapons on the ground actually matters. It gives them a better fighting chance, as well as the technology to defend themselves against what is happening accordingly from Russia. Now, why is this all relevant? Because as you just mentioned perfectly, you have to have a realignment. You have different strategies that are occurring. And when you have something like this happening on a global scale, it impacts all of us. It has dominated the news as it should be because of the impact it has on a global scale. And so it's important for us to realize that and internalize that, and tying this all together. At the end of the day, whether it be what we saw during the coronavirus pandemic in Wuhan, China, whether it's what we're watching right now and what's going on in Ukraine with Russia, we are global citizens. And it's time for us to internalize that, whether if you're in the Bronx, in New York, or anywhere in the world, we are impacted by what happens in other parts of the world. And we have a responsibility to understand that it is our job, it is our duty, it is our honor to help people in need. And if you're watching women and children having to walk for miles because a dictator is trying to take over their country, we as Americans have a responsibility, because we don't want that to be us.
Yeah. And the countless loss of lives, let's not forget, both on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. You've got some Russians out there, and I'll never forget, there was a post that was put up by ABC News that the Russian soldiers were actually saying, we don't know who to shoot because they all look like us. And I thought that to be one of the most profound statements that were actually made, that you've got soldiers out there who really don't even want to be engaged in the war. You see them actually offering each other pleasantries, feeding each other, taking care of each other. A war that probably both sides don't even want, but just at the result of one man.
Period, point blank. They didn't sign up for this. You didn't sign up for this to go into a country and take over a country because of one man's vision that this country should be theirs. And look, and I totally understand, as I've heard in many individual conversations, well, the U.S. and other large superpowers have engaged in regions around the world and actions that are not befitting and honorable to us. You're right. That is true. And we can't ignore that. But we have to assess what's happening right now. You have a man that is not going to stop if he's successful. And we have to be successful, because for all of our lifetimes, Daren, we've heard about World War I, World War II, but we weren't around during that.
Right.
And it's hard for us to process that we are in a space right now where, if things are not controlled, it's not just about Russia and Ukraine, everyone. It's about how China is paying attention, and do they try to engage in Taiwan? And does this lead to the further expansion of efforts that happens with Russia itself? And so we, again, have to internalize the volatility that is impacted by this. And lastly, as we're having this conversation over StreamYard and the engagement here, the concern around cybersecurity. It's the reason why Governor Hochul has launched out a cybersecurity task force. We've engaged with many allies. If anyone, I would encourage you to learn about Andrei Sednarsky at Cyber Nation Central and what they've been doing there. Naveed Jamali, who's been on TV many times, who talks about all of this. When you think about how you use your phone for finances, or you're watching TV, or you're interacting in different manners, cybersecurity is the next form of warfare. And we have to be attentive that even though you may not be physically in Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine will be impacting you here at home.
Yeah, definitely. I want to take a quick break and talk a little bit about the impact at home. I want to talk about how much does international relations deal with our presidential and local elections. We'll talk about that when we return right here on Perspectives. Back here on Perspectives, Daren Jaime here with you. Our guest, Michael Blake, has been sharing with us a little bit about the war in Ukraine and Russia and the effect and the impact that it's having on a local level as well as a global level. Want to bring it a little bit closer to home, Mike, and talk in this segment a little bit about what's happening around here in New York State. A lot of open eyes and ears to former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, who made some startling remarks. First of all, that he says that he's a victim of the cancel culture. Give me your latest on your thoughts on the governor saying that he's a victim of the cancel culture and where he is today.
Let's make sure we set the record straight here. You're not a victim of the cancel culture when you sexually harass women, when you covered up nursing home deaths, when you directed your staff to use state government resources on your book for you to make money, when you have repeatedly attacked individuals and said that things didn't occur when it clearly that you were lying, and when he, being Andrew Cuomo, resigned. And why did he resign? Because there were conversations and actions that were being taken around impeachment, which if he were impeached, he could not run again. And so it is telling to me, and we talked about this in the previous segment when it came to Ukraine and sports and that dynamic of how we play off of black folk, that the first public appearance by the former governor was to go into a black church and convey that he was canceled because of cancel culture for things that he did, and then continue to attack a black woman. I have been very intrigued by the premise of this, Daren, that at the end of the day, if the former governor truly believes that he did nothing wrong, and when asked about his consideration of returning to public life, saying, we'll see, why is none of his rage being directed to the current governor who has succeeded him? Why is none of his rage being directed to legislators that were pursuing articles of impeachment and talking through how to remove from office? Why is only the rage being taken against this black woman named Tish James, who called him a sick and pathetic man recently because he continues to attack her? And so you may decide, you know what, I don't know enough about what happened as it relates to the sexual harassment, which, for the record, so we're again all on the same page, the district attorneys conveyed that they found the claims to be credible and that there was evidence. They just said that there was not enough evidence to be able to feel like they can get a conviction. So let's be very clear about this. They did not say they did not think that things did not occur. But also, for every single person that is watching, if you had anyone that was at a nursing home who lost their life, do not forget that the former governor and his staff covered up the numbers of people who died in nursing homes during the pandemic to make themselves look better on national TV and to sell a book to make money. The only canceling that needed to happen was Andrew Cuomo being governor.
Well, some will say now that the governor did handle the COVID pandemic. He was the leader at the forefront of the nation. We were getting more information from him probably than we would from the former President Trump. People were leaning into him for advice. So would you say on some front that he did give good leadership in spite of these things that you've just mentioned?
Yeah. Can I acknowledge that both can be simultaneously true? That are there things that occurred during the COVID pandemic that were responsible leadership from the former governor? Yes. I would also say, Daren, that I was a part of the coalition that submitted a formal letter to the governor asking for an emergency site to be placed in the South Bronx because of the impact that was happening here. Letter was never responded to. They said to people to go to Javits or go and get cared for on the water and on the boat that was on the water. Nonsensical, to be candid, in that manner. And so can we acknowledge that both can be simultaneously true? Yes. However, let us also be very clear and not lose sight of this. Andrew Cuomo and his staff lied about people dying in nursing homes to make themselves look better, period. Andrew Cuomo is still under FBI investigation because they lied about nursing home deaths. And so the comparison is you had someone in Donald Trump who was an absolute disaster across the board. And so you had another person in Andrew Cuomo who was obviously on TV because he was the alternative. However, You had Gavin Newsom in California, who you can amplify. You had many leaders across the country you can amplify. And we can't ignore the dynamic here that when you have a brother who is a lead anchor at the time on CNN and the intersectionality of it all, you have that opportunity that's there. So, look, I think while you can recognize that there were good things that happened and there was progress that was taken, that does not ignore the absolute toxic environment that was established, sustained, perpetuated, and continued by Andrew Cuomo, where you were retaliated against for speaking out. Let's make sure we don't ignore one of the facts of the matter here, Daren, that for one of the women that Andrew Cuomo purportedly, allegedly, and it was not conveyed that it did not occur, asked, has she ever been with an older woman, asked about relationships in that manner. When she went forward to her bosses, they didn't address it with the governor. They changed her job. So let's make sure we don't ignore the dynamics here, that at the end of the day, the culture that is happening was a toxic, harassing, vitriolic culture. And you cannot allow Andrew Cuomo to show up in your black church and try to tell you otherwise.
Let's go here. Now that you have the lieutenant governor that is actually seeking re-election, we also know Jumaane Williams will be sticking his name out for a bid for governor. This opens up a door. We haven't talked about Republican candidates. The Cuomo departure has created an open door for a lot of people who will be seeking New York's highest office.
Well, I think we should also be considering, as they are in the federal level and other states, term limits to executive offices, which, Governor Hochul has laid out in her State of the State, which I do agree with. I think the notion that someone can just sit in for 3-4 terms without any responsibility or accountability, rather, in that manner is ridiculous. That said, to your question, it has opened opportunities. Governor Hochul, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, Congressman Tom Suozzi are pursuing the highest office in our state. And the responsibility now is people to make that decision and have that reflection. And when we think about up and down the ballot, Governor, Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin actively supporting his candidacy, Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, the same for him, state Senate and state assembly races as well. You have the spaces that we need to be assessing at scale. And when you think about on the congressional level, you have incredible candidates. Alessandra Biaggi, proud to be supporting her candidacy. I think she will do an incredible job within the new district line that has been created there. But we also have to recognize at the same time, Daren, that it's not just about the elections, but it's also about the party. And when we think about the changes that have to occur, there has to be changes that happen with the state Democratic Party. It is unconscionable to me that the chairman, Jay Jacobs, who I will be very candid, has supported me and has been a friend to me over the years, would indicate recently that individuals should not donate to Democratic candidates in a congressional election that's happening by him, in large part because he's waiting for his friend to run for that seat. It's ridiculous. Where you have 2 women and 2 black people that are actually running for that same seat. Same manner where he compared India Walton to David Duke. It's the same manner where he communicated that he was not asked to do more when it came to redistricting and ballot measures. So when we talk about changes, we don't just need changes that have to happen as it relates to what's going on for the elected officers. We need changes within our party, because as we're watching right now in real time, the Republican Party is the silent party, the Trump party, and the party that's standing with Russia and insurrectionists. What we cannot be is a silent party when it comes to our leadership. And if there's any changes that are needed, that's one of those that have to occur.
The president recently gave his State of the Union address, talked a lot about Russia and Ukraine, about a third of the message, and then the rest of the message dealing with domestic policies. But at the end of it all, a lot of people were saying this. Listen, a lot of stuff that he talked about during the State of the Union are things that he had in the Build Back Better program and the Build Back Better bill, and that has not yet gotten passed. And that could have a damning effect, if you will, when it comes time of going to the elections, to the election polls for the midterm elections. Are Democrats prepared for the possibility of, yet another shellacking if things do not happen the way that people have anticipated, with Democrats having both control of the House and the Senate, and people asking the question whether or not Joe Manchin or Joe Biden is the president of the United States?
Well, let's be clear. I thought that was pretty little cheap shot. Joe Biden is clearly the president of the United States. And when that was said by that reporter, I understood the action of what they were trying to motivate here. However, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, neither realize that they're Democrats, and their behavior is the reason why we can't move forward on so many matters right now. And so to your question, Darren, well, look, we can't ignore it, that if we don't get things done as a party, we will pay the consequences. And that's what happens in any election, especially in the midterm, the first midterm of a presidency. But we do have a lot that we can amplify. The reduction of child poverty, the largest reduction in child poverty in the history of our country. When we think about what has happened in terms of what the stimulus that occurred through the rescue plan, hundreds of millions of dollars that went out across the country to cities that did not have that funding before. And so we have successes to run on, and we have wins to run on. We will have a Black woman that will be a Supreme Court justice. That's going to happen. We have the opportunities to amplify. But now it's our responsibility to go further, go deeper, and be more direct and clear. And so this, to me, is the contrast. Do you stand with insurrectionists and the Russians, or do you stand with people that actually believe in intelligence and rhyme and reason? Do you care about jobs and justice, or do you care about the lies of Donald Trump? And at this moment, yes, things could be better. There's always more that can be better. But our job has to be, has progress happened? Yes. Are people being employed? Yes. Are we seeing a return and in progress in the economy? Yes. Are we seeing a reduction in poverty? Yes. Are we seeing that we are finally being able to get out of a pandemic? Yes. So when we recognize that, then you have to ask yourself the alternative, and the alternative is worse. So at the end of the day, it's really essential for all of us to understand the responsibility is upon us as a Democratic Party to share that message and to mobilize from there.
Absolutely. Mike Blake, we've got to go. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's show. But I want to thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us, letting us know what's going on, and having your voice is very critical in a time like this. Thanks a lot for being with us, my brother.
Absolutely. And let me be very clear. Democrats are driving home a message of positive change, and that's what we're going to run on, and that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of 2022.
All right, we got to leave it there. Listen, Mike Blake shared his perspective. Listen, it's important that you share your perspective and know how simple things like the war in Russia, gas prices, stock prices, all those things that are affecting us right now, how they play out on the bigger scheme. So don't just stay in your little silo. Get involved, get informed. And one best way that you can do that, watch Perspectives. Daren Jaime, until next time we meet, stay safe, share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in somebody else's life. Be here.
Don't forget to share your perspective with Shines of Light, because it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.